Yeah, welcome back into Numbers Don't Lie. I wonder how many people had this on their bingo card. Going into the international break, Liverpool would lose 3 consecutive games in all competitions. Yeah, I know, the grace, the excellence and the domination that Liverpool showed last year, and of course winning that Premier League trophy, and I would say quite comfortably now, it's not really being shown this year. I got my boy Chris Whitty in here because it's time to discuss some of the reasons as to why Liverpool have been struggling at the top half of the season so far. And look at all the new signings. Look, you see Florian Wirtz, they say, Alexander-Arnold, and of course the brains behind the operation in Arne Slot. But Chris, what's happening in terms of this breakdown? And I'm just, before you go, I know Whitty, I want to give you the floor as much as possible. I have to highlight the point that everyone seems to be talking about, these offensive stats. We need to really dive into these numbers because this is a numbers-based show, right? Numbers don't lie. So when you really look at what Liverpool have been producing overall, it starts to make a little bit of sense. Oh, when you look at last season, the goals per game is just incredible. 2.2 averaging going into most of it. Shots on per game as well. 16, big chances created, almost 4. When you come over here to this season, I mean, look, the shots aren't too far off and the big chances aren't too far off as well. But the goals have dropped off quite significantly. When you start really replicating and thinking about exactly what's happening in this Liverpool team, I think this weekend, Arne Slot went back to type. He went back to the 3 in midfield that he knows. Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and Allister. Let's go back to what we know. Let's set a foundation away at Chelsea. Problem was, it wasn't a part of the script. And they're missing one key piece because as great as all of these players have been, and we've seen it last year in terms of the big chances they created, the touches in the box, possessions won in the final third. When you look at what they're doing this year, I don't know if it's fatigue, I don't know if it's a mental problem, but there doesn't seem to be that connective tissue right now when you're looking at Liverpool. And there's only one place you can look. Yes, that midfield might be the same. Yes, the progressing in terms of those passes might be the same. But there's one piece that seems to be missing. And when you look at it overall, they're missing one key factor. And I love it because this guy right here has sold his own dream. He's gone off to Real Madrid. He's allowed himself to be great, as they say. And he's going to have his own journey as a Galactico. But Liverpool, and especially the red half, are crying right now because his assists, his big chances, his key passes per game, his penalty entries, and of course the passes forward is what Liverpool are sorely missing. When you look at what they're happening in terms of pressing in that midfield, they've been so used and so comfortable for years in being able to receive the ball, lay it off to Trent, and Trent has the decisive pass in between the lines. That, for me, Whitty, is one of the key factors as to why Liverpool are struggling this year. You can't look backwards and look forwards at the same time, but trust me, it's a big gap when you're missing Trent on the right-hand side.
And they're having such a hard time solving that right-back position as well. You bring in Jeremy Frimpong at some expense this summer. You have Connor Bradley's already in the setup. They tried Szoboszlai there as well. And I think there is just this feeling that they have not gotten it right. And also that Trent Alexander-Arnold is a bit of a unicorn as a player. There are not very many players like him. A right-back with that kind of right foot to put in crosses, that right foot to create chances on the floor as well. He just has such an ability behind Mo Salah and combines so well with Mo Salah that to replace it, it's not very simple.
It's not easy at all because we want to talk about the other parts of this game, which is this man.
Yeah.
And I know the superlatives, everyone wants to have the conversation around Mohamed Salah, what's happened to him, the goals, the assists, everything seems to have dropped off. Well, actually, the other aspects of his game that I feel like he's probably hindering his team a little bit more. Last year, I think we were all witness to the greatness of Mo Salah in terms of his excellence, especially in the final third. But what's happened this year in terms of Mo Salah is the goal contributions have significantly dropped off. The minutes per goals in terms of assists, those have depleted massively. And the big chances per game. That's what the biggest drop-off is. Mo Salah doesn't look like the same threat that he was beforehand. And I know the eye test naturally will allude to the fact of thinking to yourself, well, his team has to create better chances for him. But if you watch Liverpool closely, you actually would have recognised that a lot of their positives that occurred last year actually started when they pressed the ball first, when they were catching teams out, when they were putting teams onto the back foot. So if you naturally win the ball deeper into the opposition's third, you're going to be closer to goal. That's normal mathematics. And when you start breaking it down in terms of the shots per game for Mo Salah, the shots inside of the box for Mo Salah, touches, and everything else that goes into what is the greatness of arguably the greatest African player that's ever played in the Premier League, I'm concerned. Concerned is a good thing, but at the same time, it does create question marks. But we're here to create solutions, right? So when you flip it on and you start looking at what his team can do to do better for Mo, right? What question marks can they turn around and have about him? Whitty, how good is this for you? Or how bad is this for you as well?
Yeah, I think you look at the figures here. Obviously, the shots going down, the shots inside the box going down, this demonstrates a lack of danger. But I think the big issue for Mo Salah is the fact that he has gotten into some decent positions. We saw it at the weekend against Chelsea. I actually thought they did get him into good positions. They were playing to his strengths. He just couldn't deliver. He sailed a couple of shots into the away end at Chelsea. And you really do start to wonder, I think now going forward, is this a longer-term problem? Is this just a blip in form, which you've seen from him at times, usually more towards the end of seasons than at the beginning? Or is this a longer-term issue that they've signed a player to a long-term contract here at an age when you normally don't talk about long-term contracts? And is this going to be a problem going forward? Here, in terms of some other figures that demonstrate the issues that he's having, I think the average distance of shots taken has gotten further and further away, meaning he's not getting as many of the easy ones. I think the expected goal is an interesting one as well. Average expected goals of shots. Last season, 0.15. This year, 0.10. But also the average expected goals on target, meaning when the ball comes off his foot, what is the chance of it going in? 40% last year, and this year, 26%. And that's based off of the quality of his shots. The quality of his shots has gone down. JD, is this a worry about a player who has dropped off and might not ever recover? Or is this just a short-term issue that Liverpool need to figure out?
One thing I've learned, when an athlete like him looks after his body and conditions himself mentally, never write them off. This guy's peak could go as long as he wants it to go, and you've already seen it. But again, I don't want to focus on just Mo Salah. I want to look at the Liverpool team overall, because this team now is deeper than just the individual and the greatness that he's able to produce. So let's start highlighting the things that we can actually quantify, right? Like their pressing stats. Liverpool have been known, and any Arne Slot team has been known for what they do when they haven't got the ball. Now, when you start interested in looking at that same midfield that we identified, and we start looking at the areas in which they're winning the ball back, the percentages in terms of when they're winning the ball in the final third. Last year, they were incredible. You look at the stats from Allister, he clearly pushes the press. Szoboszlai clearly knows when the trigger is. Jones, Gravenberch, supporting cast. This year, these numbers have dropped off significantly. Nobody's showing signs of improvement. Nobody's pressing at the same rate. Nobody understands in terms of when the trigger is. You start then quantifying that to the eye test, right? What then happens is Allister, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, Jones all get caught out of position, or all going and not winning the ball. All of a sudden, that back four looks a little bit more exposed. You now start integrating those two new fullbacks. You're starting to see the reasons as to why Liverpool, beyond just the eye test, are struggling, especially statistically. These are things that can be rectified, though, Chris, almost instantly.
But can they? Because the question is, what changed over last year? We're talking about this level of performance and now this level of performance. What's changed in that Liverpool midfield? It now has Florian Wirtz in it. And Florian Wirtz, I think, is a big part of what has changed. You mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, but Florian Wirtz now is a part of this team. They set the British transfer record in bringing him into the team. And now you look at this front three, and Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota, sadly, has left us. And then you look at the group now with Isak, Gakpo, and Ekitike, that amount of times that they're winning the ball high up the pitch. And you mentioned Arne Slot, but also goes back to the Jurgen Klopp identity down the years. What were they known for? They were known for being suffocating. They were known for making it impossible to play against them. I have to be honest, JD, you watch them play so far this season, it's looking easy to play against Liverpool. And that is the worry.
Let me highlight the individual that they're missing. Of course, and you made reference to it. God rest his soul, because he's going to be a special angel. We're going to never forget him in terms of English football. But this individual right here, Luis Diaz, I think is the one that nobody's talking about. If you look at these press and the possessions won in the final third, he clearly was a massive trigger in terms of when he was able to do the doggy work, the dirty work. The bit that's not accounted for, apart from the analysts like us that recognize what Diaz is doing in terms of for his team's benefit. I tell you who this hit? Mohamed Salah. Because when Salah decided I needed a rest, I'm 32 years old, and my most effective behaviour is going to be in the final third, not necessarily running back to my own goal, his teammates were covering him. When you start looking over here, I'm not seeing anybody go above and beyond in the same intensity that we had with Luis Diaz. And that's why Liverpool fans were screaming that this was going to be a massive miss, and who was going to replicate the pressing action in terms of in this new Liverpool front three. So we can look at all the British transfer records, we can look at all of the superlatives around these players, but I want to highlight an individual that's always in the conversation. This man right here, Florian Wirtz. What are you seeing from him?
Yeah, what I'm seeing from him is a struggle to adjust. And you mentioned that British transfer record, the expectations that come with playing for Liverpool. He chose Liverpool because this was the big club that he wanted to go and play for, not Manchester City in the Premier League, not Bayern Munich in Germany. He wanted to be a Liverpool player. But you've got to figure it out in terms of the adjustments. And you look at last season, he is the main man for Bayer Leverkusen and Xabi Alonso. For the 2 seasons that they were so good in the Bundesliga, in terms of dribble attempts per game, in terms of that success rate, it going well. But then you look at this year, as a percentage of the team's touches, he just can't be as much of a main man in this side, given how many great players there are in it, and he's struggling to find his place in the game. He's attempting half as many dribbles, and they are much less successful. They're 10% less successful year on year. And so Florian Wirtz is struggling. I will say there are signs. I really liked some of the touches he had in the game against Chelsea, particularly the one where he does a full 360 and pirouettes it into the path of Salah, who couldn't score. But right, he is having a hard time involving himself in the game, and there just is an adjustment. But that being said, the money being paid, and this is the one thing that players, yes, can kind of affect, because obviously the transfer fee, it really balloons your reputation. But the question is, can you actually deliver upon that promise? Can you actually deliver upon those expectations? And so far, Wirtz is struggling to do so. And that, I think, is the biggest thing, because bringing him into the team throws off the balance of that team, throws off the balance of that midfield, and he has to overwhelm it with his talent to say, I'm better than all those other issues that I create. I will perform to a level that so far he has yet to.
Okay, so we discussed the absence of Trent. We discussed the plea of Mo Salah, the absence of Florian Wirtz as of yet. Of course, the counter-pressing system. But really and truly what we need to discuss is the overall lack of intensity we've seen in this Liverpool team. Just a lack of cohesion. Right now we have question marks as to who is this? Is this the defending champions from last year, who a lot of people had as the favourites in the knockout stages of the Champions League because of what they were able to demonstrate? Right now, Arne Slot has a massive question mark over his head, and rightfully so, because look at their defending going in, and especially against opposition in the attacking zones. The goals conceded is unlike Liverpool. It's not the foundation that Van Dijk and Konate have left. The shots allowed on goal is another massive concern. Yes, that trio of Konate, Allister and Van Dijk all know each other, all well equipped with each other, but they cannot be allowing almost 11 shots on goal. Big chances allowed, 2.5. Crosses allowed as well is another thing. And this is what we need to highlight, Chris. I feel the fullback areas. Are we getting enough intensity? We've seen years and years of Trent and Robbo in terms of Andy Robertson demonstrating what it means to be a high-level fullback in terms of in the Premier League. But the defensive side of their game is questioned sometimes, but it wasn't in terms of the crosses allowed, nowhere near this level. Are we seeing the demise of Liverpool, especially in those fullback positions? And would you say that that is the bigger area problem?
Yeah, it's kind of funny to talk about Trent being the solution defensively when he was so often talked about as the problem for this Liverpool team. But you just sort of wonder in the overall if the answer is effort-based. If the answer is, do they just need to work harder for each other? Does Mo Salah need to put in some more graft than we've seen from him early part of the season? There have been some people who have come out and said that. We saw Wayne Rooney come out and say that on his podcast, saying he needs to work more, that maybe Arne Slot needs to adjust the team to allow for the fact that Salah won't be doing that work and that Wirtz might need to make up for it. In the overall, I think the big answer to the question is things have changed at Liverpool, and everyone thought it would be for the better, but so far it has been for the worse. And this was before they started losing games. They were winning games and not playing well, but things have changed, and not necessarily for the better, which is not, I think, what any Liverpool fan was expecting when you bring in Isak, you bring in Wirtz, when you have the transfer window of the dreams of any fan. You spend all that money, you bring in these players you've heard of that you know are going to come in and step into the team, and so far, they just haven't delivered, which is shocking.
Expectations.
For the past few shows, we've always started at Liverpool because Liverpool were the champions or top of the league. Not quite there at the moment, but what's going on? How are you feeling? Gareth, come on.
Yeah, not great, but there's 31 games to still play in the league, and we've had a little blip, 3 away defeats.
Do you think it's more than that? Are you a bit worried it's more than that?
I am a little bit, but then equally, I've got sort of, like the negative side and the positive side, one on each shoulder. And one saying to me that, we've got a lot of good players there. We've got a good manager. We've got the manager that won us the title after all of those years of wanting to see it in person at Anfield. So he's got all the credit in the world in the bank. And anyone that says otherwise, well, they can do one. So, and then I just think about, all of these players that have brought us all this joy. Like a lot of stick at the moment for Mo Salah. He's had that before. He's been through patches like that before. So I'd back him to emerge the other side of it. But right now, he's obviously not playing well. And yet there is a worry. There's a worry about the balance. There's a worry about control. There's a worry how easy it is for teams to get at us. And there's also a bit of a worry that we're not putting our chances away. I mean, you know, at the weekend, fair play to Chelsea. Thought they did a lot better than I was expecting them to do. But equally, we had chances in the game and should have done better and should have won the game, in my opinion. And I think maybe it is. I don't think the manager's cracking up or any of this madness. I'm not pressing a panic button, but I do think there's a little bit where it is getting to him a little bit. I thought that when he brought Endo on as an example, I just thought, well, it feels like you're taking the point there. When to me, I'm watching it thinking, you can get at these, get at them. You know, why are you making a defensive substitution at that point in the game? So
Can I come in on that? It's interesting you say that. Now, the thing that's frustrated me in the last 2 games is that we've allowed a situation where it has been end-to-end. Yeah. And I'm thinking, sometimes as players, Scholesy, you're playing a game, Crystal Palace. Liverpool are better than Crystal Palace. Okay, Liverpool are favourites to win the game. But you've been battered in the first half. You've got 1-1. They're on an unbelievable run. I'm like, get out of there with your point. I'm a little bit like that with... And there's slightly different with Chelsea in that I think when it went to 1-1, I think a team who were, you know, the title-winning team, the champions, just go and win that game. You just,
that's what I thought.
You go and win that game, especially with the problems Chelsea had. But then the game wasn't... Liverpool were never in control of the game, I felt, after it went 1-1. You'd expect them to go and win the game, but never really in control. And even when he brought Endo on, I know it's telling you to take a point, but it didn't feel like anybody